Hello, everyone. My name is Thomas. Thank you all for joining me, both here live and if you're there online. And welcome to my talk. There's a new plumber in town. Now, the observant among the audience will quickly figure out that this is about the Plumber package, at least if you know about the Plumber package. Plumber has been with us for a while now. It's a pretty old package. You may not know it, but the first commit was back in June 10th in 2015. And the statisticians between you will quickly figure out that this means that Plumber has a 10-year-old anniversary this year. So if you read the title of the slide, you might get the sense that this talk will not end well for Plumber. But I think we should just take a brief moment and recognize what a tremendous success Plumber has been, both as a package but also at large for our community. I mean, it has allowed data scientists with no or very limited knowledge about web technologies to take their R code and share it with the world or share it with their organization. I mean, that is tremendous. But it's an old package, and I have some experience with old packages. I also maintain a package called ggplot2, which is 18 years old today. So I know something about old code, and one of the kind of, you can call it law of thermodynamics of coding is that old code accrue technical depth. There's no way around it. So what do you do once your code evolves into something that becomes hard to maintain? There's different ways to deal with this. One of them is to kind of just accept the situation. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you can just say, well, this code is horrible to maintain. But on the other hand, there's not a lot to do in it. So whenever I need to delve into it, I just have to accept that I have to fight with this code base. This is an absolutely acceptable approach to it because, on the other hand, the code base is trusted and true. It has a lot of mileage under its belt. So there's nothing wrong with keeping it around. You just have to kind of reconcile yourself that it will not be a pleasant experience to continue coding with it. There's another way around it. You can try to kind of surgically replace some of the code that is responsible for the technical depth. This is kind of what we do in ggplot2. I think every time we release ggplot2, we have taken out some of the old code and replaced it with something new. And this is perilous in terms of maintaining a package in the sense that it's very hard to convince yourself that when you replace something internally, that it just continues to work as before outside of the world. So it's certainly not something that you can do all the time, but on the other hand, you have something that continues to evolve and grow without, you can keep the technical depth pretty low. Now there's a third option, which is to kind of say, goodbye, code. Leave it behind, start on a new adventure. For Plumber, I have decided the last thing. So I'm excited to share with you that Plumber 2 is a new package that we have created, which will replace Plumber in some sense. And the rest of the talk will basically be about me convincing you that that's a fantastic thing. So, what is Plumber 2? Well, it's a complete rewrite of Plumber. There is basically no overlap in the code base between the two. Now, just because it's a complete rewrite doesn't mean that it is completely new in the sense. It is built on a lot of battle-tested technologies, so it is built on top of things that have almost been around as long as Plumber. But the code inside the Plumber 2 package is all brand new. Now, don't worry, if you're used to using Plumber, it doesn't mean that you have to go out and learn a completely new concept. It will feel very familiar if you're already using Plumber. If you have never heard of Plumber or have never used Plumber, I can just say that it's a framework that is very easy to get into, and Plumber 2 kind of adapts that idea. That being said, it contains some breaking changes, so you cannot just take your Plumber applications and just blindly port them over to Plumber 2, but it will be very easy, and you can kind of take all of the knowledge that you have from Plumber and apply a lot of it to Plumber 2. On the flip side then, it is filled with amazing new features, and I'll show some of them today. But just to start a bit with the familiarity part. So if you are used to looking at Plumber code, you will recognize this, I hope. So if you don't know anything about Plumber, it's a way of creating web servers by annotating R functions. So it feels very much as writing an R function, and if you're used to writing R functions in documentation, you're used to writing Roxygen code. And Plumber 2 annotation feels very much like Roxygen code. So this is something that you could put on top of your function, and it will turn, if you put it through Plumber, it will turn your function into like an endpoint for a web server. And if you're used to this, if you're used to doing this with Plumber, I hope that you can see that this feels very, very similar. Nothing dangerous here, maybe some new things, but some of it is completely the same. So for instance, this line, which defines that the function below this annotation will respond to people going to a URL, which is forecast/some city. In the example up here, the city is Copenhagen, that's where I'm from. This is exactly the same as you would have in Plumber. So some of it is completely the same. Now there are other things that are different. We're in 2025 now, so you can actually have multi-line comments in Plumber 2, which is like crazy. But why can we do this? Well, it's because it doesn't just look like Roxygen 2. It's actually powered by Roxygen 2 now. Plumber had its own engine for understanding this annotation, but we don't need to reinvent the wheel. So Plumber 2 is now using Roxygen 2 to pass these things. So if you're familiar with Roxygen 2, then everything that you write there will be understandable by Plumber. It also has some new tags. So if you have your function, you need to put some inputs into it. One of them is the city that we talked about up here in the URL, but there are other ways to put input into your endpoint. And one of them is the query string of the URL, which is everything that follows this, this question mark. And in Plumber, everything was kind of documented under the param thing, but they come different places from, and that means that you could kind of mask your input in various ways. Well, no more, because we now have a dedicated place for documenting and taking in query parameters. We also have a dedicated way for things coming from the body of the request. So new things, but not new concepts, I would say. The last thing I just want to point out, there is of course more to it, is that we have much richer way of documenting both the import type and the output type of the function. So here we say that this output, or this function, when it responds to a request, it responds with a 200, which means in HTTP language, it means everything is okay, here's what you asked for. And we also document that what it's returning will be an array of objects, and those objects will have an element called day, which is a date, an element called temperature, or temp, which is a number, and an element called rain, which is a Boolean. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. So we have really built out the whole documentation of input and output types in Plumber 2, so you can do even more. So that's a bit about familiarity. I hope I have convinced you that it doesn't look completely foreign, but there are some new things in there. So what about the features? Well, this is the exciting part of everything, right? And this is where I kind of convince you that this is a good thing. The first thing I want to talk about is asynchronicity. Now, asynchronicity for a web server is potentially important, potentially irrelevant. But if you have a function that takes just a bit of time to compute, you will end up blocking all the other requests that comes in while this is computing, because R is single-threaded. This is not a problem if you don't only have one user, but if you have like maybe 100 users that are constantly pinging to you, or even more, then it can be a problem because everyone else has to wait for you to finish the computations. This is where asynchronicity comes in. You can send off the computations to another server and then pick it up once it's done and then send it back to the user while you're handling other stuff. It's not that Plumber couldn't do this. If you returned a promise in a Plumber endpoint, then it could actually do the same thing. But we have built this out in Plumber 2 so that we can automatically convert your endpoints into asynchronous functions. They are built on Mirai, which is one of the newest and best packages for doing asynchronous computations in R. But it is extensible as well. So if you have your pet asynchronous package that you want to use instead, you can actually just create a new plugin for Plumber 2 to use that for asynchronous computation stuff. And as well, it allows you to chain computation. So usually when you have some sort of asynchronous computation, you want to pick it up, and you might want to do something on the mainframe in the end. And you can do this with Plumber 2 with easy tagging, and I'm going to show you how. So how do you turn something into an asynchronous function? Well, use the async tag, and this is all it takes. So if you pass this into Plumber 2, then Plumber 2 will take care of converting this function into an asynchronous execution and take care of all of it for you, basically. Now, if you want to do something after this computation has done, you can use the then tag following this this tag, and then do whatever you want to do on the main frame before, or main thread, before returning the results to the request. So that's async. Another shiny new feature in Plumber 2 is that it supports running Shiny. So there should be like a meme around, I put Shiny in your Plumber so you didn't have to Shiny on your Shiny or something like that. Basically what it means is that you can now launch and serve one or more Shiny app as part of your Plumber 2 application. Each app will run in a separate process. Plumber 2 will take care of launching them, will take care of tearing them down once Plumber 2 stops. This is actually a subset of a more general functionality that is in Plumber 2, which is something called a reverse proxy. And what this basically means is that, well, you might have something that is not Shiny that you want to serve through Plumber 2. Well, you can do that because a reverse proxy is simply a communication layer between your front end and something else on the back end. But Shiny is kind of a first-level citizen because we can launch them and tear them down as we want to do. How does this look? Well, surprisingly simple. There's a Shiny tag, and you can point it to where you want to serve it from. Here we have two different Shiny apps that we serve from two different paths. One is app/app1, and the other is /app2. So pretty simple to get going. Now, you don't have to serve them from a particular subpath of your application. You can also just serve it from the root. Now, you may think, why would I even want to do that? That's just the same as launching a Shiny app. But you might want to do this because there's also another tag that says accept. So you can serve Shiny from the root, but then have the rest of your API application being served from a subpath of your URL. So when people visit the root of your page, they're served with a Shiny app, but they can still interact with it with an API from a subpath. So how would you do that? Well, you'll just have a second file that you mount on a different subroot, and there you'll have all the API logic that you're used to have from a Plumber. There's also support for Quarto, so if you want to serve Quarto from Plumber, that's now possible. If you have parameterized reports in Quarto or R Markdown, these can be accessed by using the query parameters in the URL. Those will be funneled into the parameters in your report. You can also have support for multiple outputs. So if you have a report and you want to serve both a PDF and an HTML version of it, you can just add those extensions to the root or to the path that you're querying from, or you can use a content type header to do that. And it has built-in caching, so it's not going to rebuild the report every time that the user is asking for it. How does that look? Well, kind of like how Shiny was looking. So we just have a new tag called report, and we're just directing it to the path where we want to serve the report from. And then underneath it all, where we'd usually have an endpoint logic, we'll just point to the path of the file that we want to serve. And Plumber 2 takes care of all of that for you then. Last feature that I'm going to talk about is security. Now, security is quite important when it comes to web technologies. It's important if you're just serving Plumber inside your own organization. It is even more important if you're trying to communicate with the rest of the world. And I would say that Plumber can do better in that regard, and that is why Plumber 2 is doing better in that regard. So Plumber 2 is coming with a bunch of plugins that you can easily add to your web server. One of them is just a matter of setting best practice headers. This is not like rocket science, but a lot of people do not know about what all of the headers in a response should be to confine with best practices, and we now take their hands and give them good defaults. There's also, I think this is one of the most requested things in the Plumber GitHub page, is something like, how do I use CORS? And if you don't know about CORS, I will show you in a minute. And there's also something called resource isolation policies, which is another thing that we now support. So going back to this example that I had with Familiarity, this is just the same code. Consider that we have this weather forecasting service, and we are running that from an API and serving it out to the world. And then I have another web page that want to use this. So I have a web page and some JavaScript, and that JavaScript is then querying my other API. Now this will not work out of the box because the web has evolved to try to be more secure so that web pages cannot just from JavaScript ask other web pages for stuff. This is something called cross-origin resource sharing. And this is something that you have to turn on and say, well, I want the rest of the world to be able to kind of call what I provide. Now, how do I turn this on in Plumber 2? Well, surprisingly enough, it's pretty simple. So we have the course tag, and we just say, well, I have this web page, my trusted friend, I really want to interact with this other API I have, and we now turn it on, and everything works perfectly. And then there's the rest, because there are a lot of features in this, and I don't have time to talk about all of it, so this is just a little taster. I hope I have gotten you a bit excited about what it can do. So that was a bit about the features. What about the future? Well, I am happy to announce that Plumber 2 is available on CRAN today, or I would have been happy to announce that if that was the fact. The truth is that Plumber 2 is in the hands of CRAN today, so that means that it is probably available on CRAN within a week or so. It is very hard to time these things. Please use it if you have anything to use it for. If you don't have anything to use it for, then just like toy with it, have fun with it. Please report any issues. Please report anything that you feel is missing, any good ideas. I'll be happy to add them to it because the code is now much easier to add stuff to. But also, please be mindful of the novelty. I'm just saying this, that if I got you excited, please don't run home and then like rewrite all of the business logic of your operation in Plumber 2 and then see it crash horribly. It's not that I don't trust my code, but it's not been battle tested yet, right? So start out small and then grow it into your organization. What about Plumber? Well, don't worry, it will stay on CRAN. It is now superseded by Plumber 2, so it will not receive any new features. If you have any requests for features, we will say, well, have a go at Plumber 2 instead. But it will stay there, and that means that your current APIs will continue to work as before. So you are in no rush to update your packages. You can just continue before. And then, of course, gradually, I would advise you to move over to Plumber 2, but in your own pace. You can read much more about Plumber 2 at this URL. And otherwise, I would just say thank you so much for your attention. I hope you'll have fun writing APIs.
Testing. Okay. This phone for now, just for these questions, so back and forth to you. So just a few questions. I think we have time for like one or two. Are there any situations where you would suggest that someone start a new project and still use the
We're back here. Oh, God. We're back here? We're back here? Okay. No is the short answer.
Okay. I think we can use this. So one more question here. Will it work with Vetiver? And if so, when?
Maybe. No, this is not something I have dived into yet. This is certainly something that we will look into. And the whole, so it should work with Connect now, and it should, of course, integrate well with all our other projects, but it is still early days, so I would not try to use Vetiver with it yet, but it will come, of course.
I think we can get one quick one in. Why Plumber 2? I think you touched on this a little bit in your talk, but why Plumber 2 and not overwrite Plumber with the new code and require legacy users to install a legacy version of the package?
Yeah, so some of it comes back to like this slide. It will stay on CRAN. You don't have to do anything with the thing that you put in production. I think it's nicer of me to not break anything and require users to do something for their business logic. So I'd rather start afresh and allow users to just continue as before, but be excited enough to kind of change what they're doing gradually. So I think that is the main thing, really. And people should be able to like live with having a 2 after it. Like it worked well enough for ggplot2, so we'll be good.
Thank you so much.